Hello everyone, happy Friday and welcome to BrainScratch. I'm your host John Lorton, and today we're going to be covering the Smiley face murders. And that's not to be confused with the happy face killer, who is Keith Hunter Jesperson, who primarily killed women and was sending letters to the media signed with a happy face drawn on the bottom. But this is about the Smiley face killer murder theory, and in short, we're going to start with Wikipedia here so we could just get a brief overview of what this theory is. The smiley face murder theory, variations include smiley face murders, smiley face killings, smiley face gang, and others, is a theory advanced by two retired New York City detectives, Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, that a number of young men found dead in bodies of water across several Midwestern American states over the last decade did not accidentally drown, as concluded by law enforcement agencies, but were victims of a serial killer or killers. The term smiley face became connected to the alleged murderers when it was made public that the police had discovered graffiti depicting a smiley face near locations where they think the killer dumped the bodies in at least a dozen of the cases. The response of law enforcement investigators and other experts to Gannon and Duarte's theory has been largely skeptical. So to date, the two investigators, Gannon and Duarte, found 40 cases that they think apply to this chain of serial killings. And I know one of those has been ruled a homicide, possibly a second one, but I'm not real positive on that. But the majority of them are still labeled as accidental drownings. There is what appears to be a huge lack of evidence. Once again, we're looking at a case where a body is found in water. Interesting note that I found through researching this case is it is fairly uncommon for bodies to be found floating upward in water. Typically because of the way that the body goes limp and the arms and legs go limp, they will most typically fall forward and make the body turn over so that it is face down in water. I guess in approximately 97% of cases of accidental death, the body is found face down in water. So just a bit of curious information there. So these two detectives, retired NYPD, Frank Gannon, basically told a family that he would not let this case go. It was a case that was active when he worked for the NYPD, and that he was going to find the killers and bring them to justice. And that kind of sent him on this quest of discovering this murder theory. This theory is highly debated. If you do some searches on it on the internet, you will find two very distinct sides to this. A lot of people think that no, these are pure accidental deaths. In many of these cases, the young men were drinking and then disappear, and all of a sudden they're found in the water weeks, sometimes months later. But there does seem to be an element of alcohol that shows up in most, if not all, of these stories. In one case, I do believe that the person was known to not be a drinker. However, he was still out partying. He was still at a bar situation. And some people theorize that maybe these guys are being slipped some type of drug, and potentially they're being tortured before they're being put into the water. And that brings us to a piece of video I want to watch real quick here. This is Kevin Gannon. Let me just make sure this is loud enough.
We can prove that some individuals went in the water not on the night that they went missing, which means that they were held for an extended period of time before they entered into the water, which means not only did somebody hold them, but that totally blows up the whole theory of these young men were totally intoxicated. First of all, most of those intoxication levels, unless they were
So, as usual, I will have links to all of this down in the description box below so you can watch this video in full. And I do suggest you check out this video in full because it gives a bit more detail into why these detectives have their beliefs. And he brings up a fairly good point. Now, the trick here is I have not reviewed the investigation files for myself, obviously, for 40 cases, and that's kind of part of the problem in investigating this as a concept. There is just so much information. Each one of those deaths is its own case that could be investigated, with people that could be interviewed and tons of research that could be followed up on. So I don't know. I haven't found a good source of information that shows me kind of a breakdown of that theory that he was specifically talking about, that some of these guys' bodies were entered into the water after they were alive. It is worth noting a few of them were found, like I said, strange positions. A few, I think one or two were found face up. One was found with his arms crossed against his chest, which would lead you to believe that he was actually dead before he entered the water, because he obviously didn't go limp in the water. Another was found with hair, a bunch of hair curled up in his hand, and it took the family several years to get the police to reinvestigate that, and that is the one case that they have turned into an official homicide case. It seems like his head might have been being held in the water and he was fighting for his life and might have grabbed his own hair and ripped some of it out. But that case is still unsolved, as all of these cases. Like I said, the official ruling is accidental death on most of them, so most of these are cases closed. However, we do still have an active case that police do say is a homicide, but it is unsolved, and I'm not sure if there's any good leads on that. This is a picture of someone recently. His name is Paul, I believe it's Kochu, and he was 22, and he disappeared just in December of 2014. They found his body in March of 2015, nearly 4 months after, and I have to thank a brain scratcher named Allison who brought this whole case to my attention. I've had some other people suggest it before, but she had a bit of a personal connection to Paul in particular, and thinks that Paul, the events around Paul's disappearance seem to line up with the Smiley murder theory, Smiley face murder theory. So I just wanted to bring up Paul's information. Once again, this link is going to be down below, and you can search on more information about this and see and tell me in the comments, do you believe that Paul is part of this same murder theory? Is it a group of killers? Is it a single killer? Now, one thing that works against the single killer theory, there's actually a few things. One of them is that the smiley faces that they have found at some of the sites, supposedly they found 12 smiley faces at places where they think the bodies were put into the water. And I've looked at several of those across all kinds of different videos, and the smiley faces do not seem to match each other. Although I do think a few of them have horns. It's a smiley face that just has two horns, like it's a little devil face. However, they all seem very distinct in terms of their styles, and that's one of the theories that typically comes to refute this whole thing. Is trying to find graffiti with a smiley face is fairly easy. As a matter of fact, one person is quoted as saying, if you check a 5-mile square area, I'm pretty sure you will see a smiley face somewhere. And interestingly, there is a hill about 3 miles where I live, and there's a giant smiley face that has been chemically burned into the hill. So even when the brush grows around it, you still see this smiley face. It is a very common symbol. Of course, it is also common in terms of internet use, which leads some people to believe that maybe this is a group of killers that are organizing somehow on the internet. If you look at the time range of Gannon and Duarte's work, they're looking at murders that started in 1997, so we're definitely in the internet era there, and it is possible that there could be type of collaboration, some form of collaboration happening online that might be enabling people to conduct these murders. Also, if you search this on YouTube, there is a documentary that will pop up, The Smiley Face Killers, this one here. And I just want to give you a heads up. I do believe it's worth viewing. However, I do also believe that there are fictionalized elements in it that are pretty heavy, and by the time you get to the end of the movie, I don't want to blow it for you in case you do want to watch it, but I'm pretty sure the whole ending is completely fictionalized. That being said, some of the scenes leading up to it and some of the research they did around it are actually true. I verified some of that information, but it's difficult for me to know which parts are true and which parts are false. So if you're looking into this case and want to keep it pure, I'd say stay away from that video, The Smiley Face Killers, until maybe you're done with your research. However, if you're not going to look into the case all that much, or if you are looking for an interesting piece of art, That film is essentially kind of a new twist on the Blair Witch Project, where they've kind of woven in, it's even different than the Blair Witch Project, but they've woven in real elements, woven in what I believe are their fictionalized elements, and I think they were trying to make a mega viral video thing happen here. I don't think it quite happened. The video only has, I think, somewhere around 60,000 views, but I actually, if I would have known that it was fictional going into it, I probably would have enjoyed it more. I was a bit annoyed at the end of the 90 minutes because I thought I was doing research for this episode, and basically I had to try to junk all that information out of my head. And that's pretty tough when you're trying to, take in all this information to prep it for you guys. But I also have this playlist, Smiley Face Murder Theory playlist, that I will have in the description box below. There are several good videos that you can check out in here that do relate directly to the case. Just anytime you see New Dawn films, know that that is information that you might not be able to rely on a whole lot. So the Center for Homicide Research did a paper here, and it's called Drowning the Smiley Face Murder Theory. And they go into several points about why this murder theory is not true. Let's just scroll through some of their bullet points here really quickly. There is a problem of time order. Smiley face graffiti must be proven to have been painted at or immediately after the time of the killing. Some of the photographs of the graffiti show faded, worn out paint that looks like it had been applied years earlier. I have to agree. There is one or two cases where the graffiti looks relatively fresh, but in many of the cases it looks extremely old and weathered, and I don't know that it pertains directly to the time frame of when that body was in the water. Graffiti is omnipresent. Smiley faces were first invented in 1964 and have since spread everywhere. And of course, we're very familiar with them in terms of our internet language, emoticons on our cell phones. But even if you look outside of that and just look at graffiti, I think anyone that grabs a spray can, if they're going to mark something, the first thing they do is spray a little smiley face on it just to see how good they are. It is not hard to find smiley faces. And in terms of the two investigators, they talked about using GPS technology and trying to backtrace where the bodies were found, because they're found at one point in the river, but trying to find where they were put in. And I didn't see very good detail about how they did that. They just kind of mentioned, oh yeah, we used historical reports and GPSs and we were able to track it back. You know me, I want a little more detail than that, and I didn't really get it from the information I did review of theirs. If you have info on how they backtrack that you think is pretty solid, please be sure to include that in the comments below so I can check it out. None of the smiley faces exactly match one another. Once again, I believe that is true. I have a theory about that. We'll talk about that later. That might not necessarily explain it away. The word Sinsinawa is a red herring. So apparently at a few of the locations they did also find graffiti with this word Sinsinawa. It is commonly found throughout the Midwest and therefore is randomly occurring, a graffiti found painted near several drowning sites. It is an Indian-based word meaning rattlesnake. It could be that there's a tagger that's calling himself Sinsinawa that's going across the Midwest and tagging that. So I'm really not sure if that is related. As a matter of fact, I did a little research just trying to find any murder case where the murderer used graffiti to tag the location. I didn't go into it a whole lot, but I really didn't find anything. So if you know of any cases like that where the murderer specifically used graffiti to tag a crime scene or to tag a dump location, please let us know in the comment box below, because I'm really curious to see if that really happens. For me, logically, I would think that once you've committed a crime like that, you're not going to spend the extra time to do an artistic embellishment. If you really wanted to claim credit for doing that crime, you would do what several murderers have done in the past, which is contact the authorities, contact newspapers, send them messages, send them proof. You typically see that happen well after the fact of the actual event. To stay around at the location and spend time tagging it, even as quick as just knocking up a smiley face, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. However, I still do have a theory about that too that we'll talk about later. No criteria has been established specifying the necessary distance that a smiley face must occur in proximity to a deceased body in order to be counted. So what they're insinuating here is that the detectives went looking in the woods around the area where the body was found, and if they found a smiley face anywhere, they kind of associated that to, oh, this must be related to the crime, we found another smiley face. So once again, I have not seen the two private detectives' information specifically about that, and they kind of went cold on this a few years ago. They were very public and did a lot of television appearances. As a matter of fact, this case has been covered by CNN. I think even Geraldo Rivera did some coverage on it. So there's been a lot of people talking about it. There was one reporter in particular that kind of brought it to the forefront. I think she even won an award for doing so, but then later she was let go from the news organization that she was working for. Another reporter tried to bring this back into the fold recently with the case of Shane Montgomery, who's another relatively recent case, and he was basically being told by his editors and local law enforcement, don't do this, don't go down this road, it's not true. So there is a lot of people countering this information, if nothing else. There is no evidence of victim trauma, and this is a sticky point in a few directions. It's assumed that if something was happening to these guys, if they were really being tortured for hours before they were put into the water, there should be some type of trauma, ligature marks while they were tied up, possibly bruising from them being beaten or other such things, and that is non-existent. However, in that interview, that little clip I showed you with Detective Gannon, he goes on to say that they're also not seeing any trauma related to a slip and fall. So if you do start to go down the assumption of these are drunk college students, young men that are slipping into the river, wouldn't there be some trauma associated with that? And they're not necessarily finding that either. So that point still has my brain going both directions. I'm really not sure which way to take that information.